One of my relatives passed away suddenly. I had never met the woman. She had a daughter who was 4 years old. The little girl's name was Amanda. Her father wasn't able to raise her on his own, so he asked my aunt if she could take care of her, and he would pay for her expenses as much as he could. The little girl refused to be left alone and never left my aunt's side. It started to become a problem. My aunt couldn't go anywhere without Amanda. She constantly needed attention and was not ready to be left alone, even for a little time. Even my aunt's own daughter started to get jealous. One day, my aunt told me she had to go out of town for a couple of days and asked if I would be able to babysit the little girl for her. I agreed willingly. I lived alone and could do with some company. A few days later, my aunt dropped Amanda at my apartment. As she was leaving, she took the girl aside and said, "Amanda, please be good and behave yourself." She hugged her and left. After my aunt had gone, I tried to talk to Amanda and play some games with her, but her behavior seemed to be very strange. She had a teddy bear tucked tightly under her arm and never let go of it. She never smiled. She never spoke. All she ever did was sit quietly in the corner and stare at the wall. It made me kind of uneasy. I was trying to find something that would entertain her. I had just bought a new digital camera, and I decided to let Amanda play with my old one. When she saw the camera, her eyes lit up. I showed her how to use it, and she went around my apartment taking pictures of almost everything. There was a bright smile on her face, and this made me a little happy. That evening, I discovered how difficult Amanda was to deal with. Whenever I tried to leave the room, she started crying and screaming out my name. I couldn't leave her alone, or she would create a huge fuss. She even insisted on going to the bathroom with me, which was very embarrassing. At bedtime, she refused to stay in the spare room and insisted on sleeping next to me on my bed. I read her a bedtime story, and after a while, I managed to put her to sleep. That was when I noticed her teddy bear. One of its legs was charred and blackened, as if it had been burned. It made me wonder how and why she was carrying a burnt teddy instead of the many new toys my aunt had bought for her. In the middle of the night, I was awoken by a strange noise. When I turned over, I saw that something was wrong with Amanda. The little girl's body was trembling and shaking. Her eyes were wide open, her teeth were chattering, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I held her close and asked what was wrong. "She's looking at me again," she mumbled. "Who is?" I asked in surprise. "The dark woman," replied Amanda. She wouldn't say anything more. I tried to tell her it was just her imagination, but she kept shaking her head and whimpering. It took me a long time to get her to go back to sleep again. The next day, Amanda was fine again. She loved playing with my digital camera. When it was time for her to go home, I told her she could keep it. Amanda hugged me. Although she didn't say anything, I could say she was overjoyed. I dropped the little girl off at my aunt's place and stayed to have a cup of tea. My aunt thanked me for taking care of Amanda, and we spent some time chatting at the kitchen table while Amanda went around clicking pictures of my aunt's house with the digital camera that I gave her. "Poor little thing," said my aunt. "She hasn't said a word since her mother died." I couldn't contain my curiosity. "How did Amanda's mom die?" I asked. A strange look overtook my aunt's face. "She died in a fire." "How did the fire start?" I asked. "Well," my aunt hesitated at first, unwilling to talk about it. "It's a very sad story. She committed suicide." Amanda's mother was a very troubled woman. She poured gasoline over herself and lit a match. She burned herself alive. "Oh my God! How horrible!" "Yes," said my aunt. "Her family was so shocked, they hushed it up and pretended it was an accident. We had a small funeral, but only close relatives were invited. Amanda wasn't there. She doesn't even know her mother is dead. She thinks her mother is just on a long holiday and will be back in a few weeks. We haven't had the heart to tell her the truth." Poor Amanda. I can't even imagine what she must be going through, I said. My aunt just nodded her head sadly. I said goodbye to Amanda and left my aunt's house. I called her often to ask her about Amanda and how she was doing. A few days later, I got to know that Amanda died. My aunt was trying to change Amanda's behavior. At night, she forced the little girl to sleep in her own bedroom. Even though Amanda screamed and cried, my aunt left her there and locked the door so that she could learn to overcome her fears. In the morning, she found Amanda lying motionless in bed. The poor little girl was dead. Nobody could understand what had happened. The coroner couldn't determine a cause of death. There wasn't a mark on her body. She was perfectly healthy. She had just mysteriously died during the night. There was no explanation. After the funeral, I went back to my aunt's house. Everyone was very sad. Amanda's father was there too, but didn't speak a word and left in a while. My aunt returned the digital camera I had given to Amanda. I took it home with me. It was something to remember her by. The memory card was full of random photos that Amanda had taken. I realized there were a few pictures of Amanda too. Probably my aunt had clicked them. I browsed through them, wiping a tear from my eye. There were pictures of my apartment, pictures of my aunt's house, pictures of flowers, dogs, toys, candy. Silly pictures that a child would take. Then I came to the last picture on the memory card, and it made my blood run cold. My hands were trembling. I wanted to scream, but nothing would come out. The timestamp on the photo showed that it had been taken on the night Amanda died. Here is the last picture that the poor girl ever took with my digital camera.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more videos.